Hey book lovers, welcome to While I Read. I'm Katie Dodrell, and today I'm going to talk about the top 10 books that I read in 2024. My goal for 2024 was to read 100 books. I don't think I'm going to get to 100. I'm hoping that I might get to 85, maybe even 90, but we'll see. I'll update you at the end of the year as to how many books I got to. But today I'm really excited to talk about my top 10 favorite books that I read this year. This is kind of a full circle moment for me. I started this channel almost 1 year ago talking about my top 10 books of 2023. So I'm really excited that I've made it almost a year and that now I'm ready to wrap up my 2024 year in books. So, the books that I talk about today are my favorite books that I read this year. Some of them are brand new books that were just published this year. Others of them are books that were published a few years ago, but I read them for the first time this year. So, most of the books are in the thriller category, as you might guess, but I also have a book in the fantasy category and a couple in the cozy mystery category. As always, you can find links to all of the books that I talk about today in the description. If you click those links and buy the book, I will get a small percentage of the proceeds at no extra cost to you. That's a way that you can support my channel if you are interested in any of these books. I'm going to talk about these books in no particular order until I get to the top three, and then I will talk about my top three favorite books of the year, including my number one absolute favorite book that I read in 2024. So let's get started. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is in the fantasy category, and that is The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This book is described as a cottagecore romantasy, which I did not even know was a subgenre of fantasy, but I love it. So it's basically like a Hallmark romantic comedy, but with some fantastic creatures and mythical lands and that kind of thing thrown in. So it's about a young woman named Kiela who is a librarian in this city called Elysium, and she works in the great library there, and it's got all of these magical books in it, and there are revolutionaries in the city who are burning the city, and they are coming to the library, and they've actually started burning the library. So Kiela escapes the library in a boat with all of the books that she can carry, as well as her sentient plant sidekick, Kaz. Yes, he is a sentient plant. He can think and talk, and he's basically a person, except that he's a plant. So they escape to this island where Kiela was born and grew up until she was 9 years old. Her parents are no longer living, but she knows that there's still a home there on the island, a house that she owns. So they go to this house, and of course it's dilapidated, it's falling apart, but Kiela and her plant take refuge in this house. So Kiela is just very introverted, very shy. In the library, she hardly ever talked to anyone else besides Kaz. But now that she's on this island trying to make a home for herself, she discovers that she's going to have to talk to people. She's going to have to go down to the village and talk to some people who are there. She meets a kindly bake shop owner and some others in the village. And by the way, the people that she meets are all different kinds of creatures. There are centaurs, there are people with horns, people with wings. Kiela herself is blue. So there's just all kinds of different creatures in this world, which makes it really fun to read about. So she has to talk to people and get to know them. She also has a handsome neighbor, as you would expect from a Hallmark movie, which is basically what this book is. And she has to get to know this neighbor. She needs his help. Kiela starts using some of the spells in the magic books that she saved from the library, and using any kind of magic is illegal. So that's a conflict in this book that Kiela has to navigate. There's also some delicious baking going on in this book. She gets cinnamon buns from the baker that she makes friends with. Kiela herself makes jams and jellies. So this book will definitely make you want to eat something sweet while you're reading it. It's a really good book, a really fun cottage core as she's decorating her home and restoring it to where it's a place that she can live in and be comfortable. And I had a great time reading this cozy book this year. Next, two of the books in my top 10 are in the cozy mystery category. And the first one that I want to talk about is The Semester of Our Discontent by Cynthia Cunn. This is the first book in the Lila McLean Academic Mystery series, and I have loved this series this year. There are 5 books in it so far, and there may not be any more books in it because I think the last book was published in 2020. But I have had a great time reading this series. So Lila McLean is an English professor. In the first book, the one I'm talking about now, The Semester of Our Discontent, she has just started her job at Stonedale University, which is a small college in Colorado. And she's excited to start her job. She's meeting with the department head and she's proposing a course that she would like to teach. And the department head is kind of rude to her. They have an argument. He's not interested in her course. And then a few hours later, she finds the department head dead. He's been murdered. So Lila quickly becomes a suspect in the murder. So she's trying to figure out who actually murdered this department head. And as she starts sleuthing, trying to discover who the real killer is, she discovers that there are other mysteries on the campus, including a secret society, a secret network of tunnels underneath the campus. It's a really cool book. I always love dark academia or campus thrillers, campus mysteries. And I really love the character of Lila. She's very smart, very tenacious. This book is an accurate portrayal of what it's like to work at a college as a professor. I related to a lot of what was in this book. So I really enjoyed it. It was a great start to the series, and I definitely recommend the Lila McLean Academic Mysteries and The Semester of Our Discontent. The next cozy mystery on my list is Murder in Hibery by Vanessa Kelly. So this book is a continuation of my favorite all-time book, Emma by Jane Austen. In this book, Emma is married to Mr. Knightley. She's gotten married to him at the end of the original Emma. And she and her friend Harriet Martin find the dead body of Mrs. Elton, who was a hated character in the original Emma book. So they find her body in the church. And so immediately Emma suspects that there has been some kind of foul play. So she starts trying to figure out who the real murderer is. And of course, there are others in positions of power like the sheriff or a deputy or a coroner who don't believe, they're not sure that anybody really murdered Miss Elton. Then they think that it might have been Miss Bates, who, if you remember, Miss Bates is the hilariously talkative, somewhat annoying character from the first book, but she would never hurt a fly. And so Emma wants to prove that Miss Bates is not the murderer, and she wants to figure out who the true murderer of Mrs. Elton is. Emma's husband, George Knightley, is a magistrate, and so he is involved in the case. And this book is just really fun to see continued interactions between Emma and Mr. Knightley, and to see these other beloved characters from the original Emma, like Emma's father, her sister Isabella, and her brother-in-law John, and her friend Harriet, Miss Bates, Mr. Elton, all of these characters that we know and love. I really enjoyed reading this book. It's the first book in a new series by Vanessa Kelly that features Jane Austen characters solving mysteries. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of this series. The next book on my top 10 list is The Stranger Diaries by Ellie Griffiths. So this book is about an English teacher named Claire Cassidy. She is teaching a course about this Gothic writer named R.M. Holland. And then there is a murder. One of Claire's colleagues, another English teacher and Claire's good friend, is murdered. and near her body is a quote from R.M. Holland. So the book is about Claire and the police and others trying to figure out who the murderer of her friend was. So, of course, Claire is a suspect because she's an expert on R.M. Holland. We get some chapters that are from Claire's point of view. We get some chapters that are from the detective who is investigating Claire. And we get some chapters from the point of view of Claire's daughter, Georgia. I love an academic thriller, and I loved the school setting of this. It was a very cozy book. There are a lot of chapters where Claire is in her home reading, or she and her daughter are watching TV and ordering pizza. So that was fun. It was also pretty scary. I loved the aspect of the story within the book. So throughout the book, we get little snippets of the R.M. Holland story that is found quoted near the person's body. And at the end, we finally get to read the whole story, and it's really good and creepy. So I had a really fun time reading this book, a great dark academia thriller. The next thriller on my top 10 list is The Last One at the Wedding by Jason Rekulak. So this book is about a man in his 50s named Frank. He is a delivery driver, and one day he gets a call from his daughter Maggie, and he's very surprised to hear from her because he and Maggie have been estranged for the past 3 years after a big fight. But Maggie is calling to tell him that she is engaged and she wants her dad to be part of the wedding. So Frank is thrilled to hear from Maggie. He's ready to put the past behind them, to make up with her, and he's eager to meet her fiance. But when he does meet her fiance, he finds that the fiance is just a little off-putting. It's a guy named Aiden. It's obvious that he's very rich. Frank finds out that he's the son of this tech billionaire. So Maggie is marrying into this very rich family. So eventually it's the weekend of the wedding, and Frank goes to this secluded estate where the Gardner family that Maggie is marrying into lives. So when he gets there, he has to sign this really long non-disclosure agreement, and the estate is very secluded, very private. He goes into town and he finds that the people in the town don't really have a very high opinion of the Gardner family. There's even a mystery with a young woman in town that Maggie's fiance may have had something to do with this woman's disappearance. So Frank tries to bring up some of these things to Maggie, and she just brushes him off. But all during the wedding weekend, Frank just feels like things are kind of strange, and he can't figure out what's going on, but he's very worried about Maggie marrying into this family. So this book was really good. I loved the isolated aspect of this secluded estate where this very rich family lives. I loved how Frank was trying to figure out what was happening. He was a really good character to me. His sister and a foster child that she's looking after accompany him to the wedding, and they add some humor to the book that I really enjoyed. It has a pretty big twist in it. I've heard some other people say that they guessed the twist. I did not guess it, and so it pretty much blew my mind. I think this book will shock you. I found it shocking. It was a real page turner to me, and I couldn't put it down. And then the end left me really thinking. It raised some big moral questions, like what would I do in a situation like that? So I really enjoyed The Last One at the Wedding. So the next book on my list is One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. I really love Ruth Ware. I've read all her books. This book, One Perfect Couple, didn't quite live up to last year's book, 0 Days, in my opinion, but it was still good enough to be on my top 10 list. So this book is about an academic researcher named Lila. She is doing some research at a university, but her project is kind of fizzling out. She's afraid she's going to lose her job soon. Her boyfriend, Nico, gets an opportunity to go on a reality show called One Perfect Couple. But Lila would have to join him on the show because obviously it's about couples. Lila doesn't really want to do it, but Nico talks her into it. So they end up going to this island in the Indian Ocean where they're competing against 5 or 6 other couples to be named one perfect couple, meaning that they would win a cash prize. Nico is hopeful that it would help jumpstart his acting career. But when they get to the island, they find that the reality show seems a little sketchy. And then the first night on the island, all of the producers go back to the ship. So it's just the couples left on the island. And a big storm comes through. And so people are injured, structures are destroyed. And so the first part of the book is about the people on the island trying to survive this storm and then trying to survive the aftermath, trying to help the people who have been injured. There are even people who were killed in the storm. So the first part of the book is all about that. And then it's about what happens as they're trying to figure out how to survive after the storm has blown through. They don't know what happened to the producers who were on the ship. They don't have any contact with them. They can't see the ship, so they don't know. Are these people alive? They don't think that they are. They don't have any way to communicate with anyone else. They do have like a radio, and so they'll talk on the radio and try to send distress signals, but they don't know if it's going to anyone. So then people on the island, of course, in a situation like this, people react differently. Some people step up and start taking on leadership roles, but then some of the people who are doing this may have ulterior motives. So it kind of had that Lord of the Flies aspect to it. People trying to kind of form a society on this island and people who are trying to take advantage of the situation for their own gain. So it was a very good book. It was very suspenseful. It kept me interested the whole time, had that nice isolated setting that I enjoy. So One Perfect Couple was a good addition to the Ruth Ware canon. The next thriller on my top 10 list is Like Mother, Like Daughter by Kimberly McCreight. So this book is about a woman named Kat who is a successful lawyer. She seems to have kind of a boring life, at least that's what her daughter Cleo thinks. So Kat and Cleo are kind of estranged from each other as the story is starting. They're still kind of texting a little bit, but Cleo is not really happy with her mom. So Cleo does agree to come over and have dinner with her mom at her mom's house, Cleo's childhood home. When Cleo gets there, she finds that there's a chicken in the oven, there's green beans burning on the stove, but no sign of her mom until Cleo finds her mom's bloody shoe under the couch. So she realizes that something has happened. So she calls the police and they start investigating, trying to figure out what's happened to Kat. So we get some chapters that are from Cleo's point of view as she tries to figure out what happened to her mom. Cleo is around 20 years old. She's a student at NYU. She has done some kind of dumb things. There's not really another way to say it. She had gotten involved with a drug dealer. Her mom had told her that she wasn't going to pay for her to stay in college unless she broke things off with this drug dealer. So that's why she wasn't speaking to her mom. But as Cleo starts looking into her mom's disappearance, she finds that her mom actually has a lot of secrets that she didn't know about. Meanwhile, we get Kat's point of view, and her point of view starts 8 days before the disappearance. So we get to find out what was going on in Kat's life earlier that led up to her disappearance. We find out that she's not just the boring lawyer that her daughter thinks she is. She's actually the fixer for her firm, and she's dealing with multiple threats that might have had something to do with her disappearance. We also find out about Kat's life growing up. She grew up in a group home and she had some dangerous experiences then that might have something to do with her disappearance. So the book was really fast-paced and fun. I liked both the characters. I also liked the portrayal of the complicated relationship between a mother and daughter. So it was a really good book to read, and I definitely recommend Like Mother, Like Daughter. So now we are down to my top 3 books. So these are my 3 favorite books that I read this year. So number 3 is Every Vow You Break by Peter Swanson. This was published a few years ago, but I just read it for the first time this year. It's about a woman named Abigail. She's engaged to marry a millionaire named Bruce, and she goes on her bachelorette weekend. And during this weekend, she has a one night stand with this guy. He seems like a nice guy, but she doesn't really know a lot about him. She doesn't even know his real name. So after it's over, she feels guilty. She thinks about things really hard, and she's like, I love Bruce. I shouldn't have done that. I'm just going to forget that this ever happened and just go on with my marriage and never tell Bruce that anything like this happened. So she and Bruce get married and they go on their honeymoon to this isolated island off the coast of Maine. Y'all know I love an isolated island. So they get there to the island and they have a luxurious place to stay. There's a sauna, there's just all kinds of things that they can do there. So while they're there, Abigail sees the guy that she had the affair with. And so he approaches her and talks to her privately, and he tells her that he feels like they have a future together. And he's there to convince her to leave Bruce and start a relationship with him. So Abigail can't figure out what to do. Of course, she doesn't want to tell Bruce what's going on, but she's also really scared. This guy kind of seems like a stalker. And so she's trying to figure out what to do. How can she manage things on this isolated island with her husband and the guy she cheated on her husband with? So then some other mysterious things start happening. She sees this other woman who looks like she's running away from something outside at night, but when she tries to tell people about it, nobody really seems to take Abigail seriously. So Abigail starts trying to figure out what's going on, and what ends up happening pretty much blew my mind. Like, it was just crazy. So I really enjoyed this book's isolated setting. I enjoyed the moral questions that it presented. The characters were not really people that you would like or maybe even sympathize with, but it was still a fast-paced, good book that I enjoyed. Book number 2 on my list is Runtime by Catherine Ryan Howard. So Catherine Ryan Howard is an author that I just discovered this year. I've read several of her books and I really like her. So Runtime, I always have trouble explaining it. It's about a woman named Adele. She's an Irish actress and she has been having trouble in Hollywood. She's trying to make it as an actress, but she's struggling. But she gets the script for this movie called Final Draft that's being filmed in Ireland. And she accepts it, even though there's a lot that she doesn't know. She has to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So it's being filmed in this isolated location deep in the woods in Ireland. So she gets there and she finds out that she's the only woman on the set, which is kind of weird. So as she starts filming, and so the movie is about a woman who's staying at an isolated location in Ireland. And the woman in the movie, the character, starts reading a book. And the things in the book start happening to the character in the movie. Meanwhile, the things in the movie start happening to Adele. So some of the creepy things, like hearing something creepy or seeing some kind of creepy figure out the window, that kind of thing. So it's a really meta concept. I've read where some people found it a little gimmicky. To me, it wasn't. I just really enjoyed it. And I was just totally swept away in this book. I was very interested in finding out what happened to Adele. I loved the isolated setting. It's very rainy. And I loved Adele's fight for survival. She was a really good character to me. The twist in the book surprised me, and I just had a great time from start to finish with this book. All right, it's the one you've been waiting for. We finally made it to book number 1. Are y'all ready? My favorite book that I read in 2024 was Look in the Mirror by Catherine Stedman. So, this was a brand new book published this year, this past summer. It's about two women. One of them is a woman named Nina, who her father has passed away, and she finds out that she's inherited a house in the British Virgin Islands from her father. Her father was an academic and he didn't have a lot of money that Nina knows of. She had no idea that he owned this home in the British Virgin Islands. And so she goes out there to see the home and she finds this beautifully constructed house, all glass and marble. It's a smart house with all kinds of technical innovations in it. And so Nina is just staying in this house trying to figure out what in the world the connection is with her father. She doesn't know how he could have afforded a house like this, so she knows he must have had some kind of secrets from her. So she's trying to figure out what those secrets are. Meanwhile, the other point of view character is a woman named Maria. And she's a medical student who works as a nanny for super rich families. So she gets an assignment to go to a home to look after a family. When she gets there, the family is not there, but she has instructions to make herself at home in this luxurious house. So she takes advantage of the pool, she takes advantage of all of the amenities of this house, but in her instructions, there's a note that there is a locked door to the basement that she is not supposed to open. So, of course, Maria can't help being very curious about that door. So, we go back and forth between these two women's points of view. They were both really good characters to me. Sometimes when you have dual points of view like that, you have one character who's your favorite and you always want to get back to that point of view. But in this one, I enjoyed both points of view. I liked the balance of finding out what's going on with Nina and finding out what's going on with Maria, trying to figure out what's the connection between these two women. What are the timelines going on? Is it the same timeline or is one ahead or behind the other? So it was really good. What's actually going on in that basement is really shocking. Both of these women are fighters, and it was really good to read about these strong female characters. I liked the setting. This was just an all-around great thriller that I loved. So there you have it, my top 10 books that I read in 2024. Did you read any of these books? Did you like them? Tell me what your top 3 books were that you read this year. Please leave a comment for me. If you liked this video and you want more book recommendations and reviews, please subscribe to my channel. Now, you go make New Year's resolutions while I read.